let's talk about the question of tariffs, shall we, and what the tariffs were meant to achieve. So Trump's tariffs were meant to incentivize American companies to bring their manufacturing back to the United States, which would benefit Americans, working class Americans, those Americans that the left traditionally claimed to care about. Now, you may have been aware of Kyle Kalinski's Twitter feed recently. He doesn't seem to be showing a great deal of compassion for working class Americans. In fact, he seems to agree with China, and I believe this is a Chinese-made AI video, which I'll play in the background just so you guys can see it, which is just really fat Americans slaving away on a sweatshop line, stitching using the old sewing machines, old-fashioned sewing machines, as if there's something wrong with this. Sorry, what's wrong with this exactly? For a lot of people, this kind of labor is perfectly within their remit, right? Not everyone is 130 IQ Anglo. Not everyone is someone who is going to use their mind to earn a living. In fact, most people don't. Most people are actually well and truly well suited to using their hands to earn a living. And there's nothing ignoble about this. This is not disgraceful. This does not lower the dignity of the American person to do labor, do what is essentially kind of manual or manufacturing labor. There's nothing wrong with this kind of work. This is perfectly useful. This is the kind of work that made Britain and America rich in the first place. And it's only those kind of pampered people like Kyle Kalinske, who went to university and did politics, and now talk about politics on YouTube for a living. Well, these people make it all possible, right? The people who are making consumer electronics, Kyle uses on a daily basis. But for some reason, if Americans make these goods, that's bad. And it's actually like Kyle looks down his nose at those people who just fix things or make things. Like, I used to work as a laptop repairman, right? I used to go to a laptop repair factory, I guess you call it, a shop, whatever. And I'd be given a broken laptop, and there'd probably be a diagnosis with it, but if not, I'd have to figure out what's wrong with it, take it all apart, fix it, blah, 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 shove it out for testing, right? That was fine. I liked that job. Like, it was a perfectly nice job. My problem was how far I had to travel to get there. That was a perfectly good job. There was nothing wrong with it. And I was fine. It's the sort of job you could put your headphones in and you sit there, and at the end of it, bam, I've made something work. I've fixed something. I have created something. Here is a thing that I have made with my own fair hands, and I can be proud of my day's work. I have been productive, literally productive. And for some reason, Kyle thinks if that's not you spurging out on YouTube, then that's bad. Like, this is somehow beneath the dignity of Americans. It's like, okay, that's very interesting. Because what Kyle is thinking there is the Americans are some sort of Uber race, right? They are master people. They are better than everyone. Better than this. Better than getting their hands dirty. Better than using their hands to earn a living. Which is a kind of crazy perspective, since he actually shares it with the Chinese Communist Party. Because what they're doing is saying, look, you don't want to be like us, do you? And it's like, well, you're quite happy doing this. Like, if we can't be happy doing this, but you can be happy doing this. That's a crazy perspective. Because really, what the Chinese are saying here is, please don't steal our business, right? They don't want you to take manufacturing back to the United States, because this is the source of their wealth. For some reason, in the late 20th century, the powers that be decided it was wise to impoverish the Western working classes by just exporting all of our manufacturing, especially when it's cheap consumer tat, to Eastern plants, where they would pay them $1 a day. Now, wages in the Orient and various other places have gone up, so it's not like they're trapped in this forever. But that just means, well, what's the big deal about having them in China now, right? Whereas China, now that they're there, okay, I'm not going to move them. But China's like, okay, well, we want to keep them, which is why they're trying to demoralize you and make you think, no, I couldn't possibly do this. This is a perfectly good job. Like, I've worked in factories. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with factory work. If you can put a headphone in, which in a lot of these cases, I'm sure you'd be able to, because, you know, you're not doing anything that requires you to actually interface with any other people. I don't see a problem with it. Like, I've been able to do this in the past, especially if it's not in like a sanitized environment. I worked in a milk factory once, a St. Ivel factory. So the entire place smelled like puke. Obviously, you couldn't have things in your ears there because of germs and whatnot. But, and so that was pretty rough. I didn't enjoy that much. But again, I'm on the right-hand side of the bell curve, right? Well, at least a third of the population are on the left-hand side of the bell curve. And okay, fine, Kyle. I can see you being like, well, I'm above factory work. Yeah, you might be, but you're not representative of everyone in the country. And actually, there's a good third of the people who are just locked out of doing anything with their minds, academic work, by dint of the fact that they're not that bright. And that's not a judgment. I'm not saying that these are bad people. I'm not saying these people don't deserve houses. I'm not saying they don't deserve the opportunity to work hard and earn a good living with the sweat of their brow. This is noble for them. Right, I'm not expecting, like, God forbid, we were being judged on our ability to dunk, right? I enjoyed basketball when I was a kid. I couldn't dunk because I'm 5'9", right? I can't jump high enough to dunk. So I would have been judged very poorly on that metric. Why would we want to judge these people who themselves wouldn't claim to be academic? They wouldn't say, hang on a second, I've got an IQ of 90. I deserve to be making policy at the highest echelons of government. They're humble people. They don't think that way. What they think is, I would just like the opportunity to work hard, earn a good living, and provide for my family. And that's really something they're completely entitled to. And we shouldn't actually be denigrating, because the only people that helps are people elsewhere. Our competitors, people who seek to is essentially dethrone the West from its position of wealth, power, and authority. And so it's a very peculiar thing watching Kyle Kalinske essentially side with the Chinese Communist Party, saying, no, this work is too good for you Americans. You're not allowed to be doing this. Trust us, bro. We ought to be doing that job and making that money. It's like, no, I'd rather our people do those jobs and make that money and be contributing, happy, flourishing, able to buy houses, able to put their kids through college, blah, 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 rather than these people. And it's not that I've got anything against these people. I don't know these people. I've got no connection to these people, and I really don't trust their government. I think their government has evil designs on us, which is why they make this kind of AI nonsense to demoralize us. And another thing that keeps coming up is, okay, well, look, you don't want to work in a sweatshop, do you? It's like, I mean, I've done worse, right? I used to clean nightclub toilets. Trust me, working in a sweatshop, definitely not the lowest of the low or anything like that by any standard, right? But Geoffrey Miller here makes a good point, right? When journalists say, I wouldn't want to work in a factory, so no American should have to work in a factory, what's hilarious about this, who cares what a journalist thinks? Who cares what Kyle Kalinske thinks, right? There are lots of people who are just fine working in factories. And in fact, you get a kind of team spirit, a camaraderie in these factories. I always felt like a bit of an outsider with the other people I was working on the lines with, because I didn't know them. Because I was there for like a month or 2 months or something, and they'd been there 20 years, because this suits them. This suits them as a habit of life, right? But anyway, journalists don't want to work in a factory. That's fine, bro. Not everyone has to work in a factory. But they are imagining stereotyped 1920s assembly line where workers are doing the same repetitive movements all day, the type of work that is actually easiest and most obvious thing to automate these days. That's exactly correct. They are expecting to be treated like the Chinese sweatshop labourer, which for some reason is fine for the Chinese, but it's not good enough for Americans. You know, they're the equality people, by the way. They fine for those guys, not for our guys, right? Okay, fine. But also, it's just not how it works, right? For example, this is in the Wall Street Journal 7 years ago. The robot revolution, automation comes to fashion, right? And he's just showing you here. Look, the machines can do all of this now. If I can mute it. Right? The machines do all of this now automatically. So you don't need to stitch by hand, because actually robotics and automation, and they show us a bit in the beginning of this as well, has significantly caught up with what is possible to do, and is actually quicker and more efficient and has less mistakes than a human doing it. So the humans just need to essentially check things at the end of it, rather and just make sure the machines aren't breaking, rather than do the back-breaking quote-unquote labour of stitching. Again, there's nothing wrong with the job, but rather than doing that work themselves, actually we do have robots now to do this. And so do we want, and this is something that in this they point out that Chinese Chinese laborers, not her though, she's a professor, East Asian laborers, they're concerned about this. It's like, okay, well, fine. So they're worried in their countries about getting replaced by robots. Can't we have that in our country instead? Does it have to be in China? And like I said, I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs of the tariffs. I don't think it's going great, to be honest. I think it could have been handled better. And I'm not saying that it's going to be effective or anything like that. But addressing the underlying issue, wouldn't it be better that American goods are made in America by heavily automated factories rather than them being made by sweatshop laborers, slaves in the East? Like, that would be better for us. And, they're not our problem, are they? We don't have an obligation to make sure they are slaves making our $2 shirts or something like that, right? And it's not shameful for Americans to do that. It's a really bourgeois position to be like, well, I would never do any manual labor myself. Okay, I would. I'm not above it. Why would anyone be above it? It's not working McDonald's, is it?